It is a beautiful day to start living your life the way you want to live it. Welcome back to the Forward Focus Finish series. I'm Jason. Last week we talked about controlling our reactions, controlling our emotions, and doing so in such a way to where we were going to take a moment to try to think about how we were going to react to certain things, putting that buffer between cause and effect, action and reaction. And I suggested that you write down 5 to 10 things that you could have done differently. I'll give you one example for me. Last week my daughter was getting up from the dinner table to bring her breakfast to the sink as she's been instructed. Well, she kind of didn't pay attention and she tripped and she spilled syrup all over the ground, and I got a little upset by that, as I've told her in the past to be more careful. Well, she started to speak her mind as far as defending herself, and I immediately cut her off as being disrespectful and talking back and said, no, clean it up. I don't want to hear any excuses. After I dropped her off at school and I had a chance to reflect on that conversation, I actually applaud her for what she was trying to do. She was sticking up for herself and trying to tell me, hey, this is what happened. I was being careful, but X led to Y. And I didn't give her the opportunity to speak her piece. And I'm glad that she did that, because she's standing up for herself. She's not just blindly going along with what the laws are telling her to do. She's trying to say, hey, listen, this is what happened. Give me an opportunity to speak here. So it gave me the opportunity to realize that I can't have such a knee-jerk reaction in those situations. She's 10 years old now. Her mind is starting to formulate to a point where she's going to start questioning certain things, and I have to be able to explain them to her as to, hey, this is why we do a certain thing. So it gave me, again, an opportunity to learn as far as how to react in those situations. So in our first video, we practiced on being more aware of the amount of times that we complain. We tried to curb those urges to complain by being more cognizant of when they were happening and stifle them before they actually became thoughts or they became verbalized. Last week, we learned how to add a buffer in between something happening and how we reacted to it. This week, we're going to focus on name calling. And more specifically, and this is something that's going to be very impersonal to me, that I'm going to delve a lot in detail into, and that is the use of the word narcissist in today's society. Now, before I delve too deep into this subject, I absolutely am aware that narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder are very valid things, and there are victims of being in relationships with those types of individuals. I empathize for those people. This is not justifying or protecting those individuals or saying they were within their own right in any way. What this is simply going to be is showing that the word narcissist today is almost like the term ADHD was in the 90s, how it's overused and globalized and thrown towards anybody who may even remotely fit that definition. The psychological definition of narcissist and narcissism is an inflated, grandiose self-image. These individuals usually think they're far more important than the average individual, and they're exempt to certain rules, or they have certain entitlements, or exempt from judgments, and that their behavior is justified. Now, as with my other videos, this one also comes from a very personal place. I recently just got out of a relationship, and near the end of that relationship, my then girlfriend would refer to me as a narcissist. So much so to the point where I actually thought maybe I was, and I decided to do some research on it. The first place I went to was social media, and boy oh boy, there are a bevy of articles out there about narcissism. A lot of them are written by unqualified individuals with no scientific background. The one I'm going to focus on is 121 Things a Narcissist Says When They're Gaslighting You by Angela Atkinson. Now, Ms. Atkinson is a certified life coach, and she has a support group for survivors and victims of narcissistic relationships. I personally think what she's doing is great. However, this article is a little bit reckless. First off, 121 things. Do you think that's enough? When you broaden so many opportunities, you're pretty much going to run the gamut of everybody that you know. Now, what she did is she sampled individuals in her group as far as terms that their narcissistic partners used in the relationship. She never once said if those individuals were ever clinically diagnosed as narcissists. The terms used in the article are ambiguous enough, such as, I was busy, whatever, and you need to communicate better. Those are things I've heard all the time from a lot of people around me. I would not say that every one of them are narcissists. Now the problem is this article has gained a lot of steam on social media, and a lot of individuals are using it to diagnose other people. I was on a narcissist support group today where one of the members didn't get a reply that they liked from another member and immediately started saying, "Hey, this person's a narcissist. We have to get him out of the group. Ban him, block him." Slow down. All the person did, albeit bluntly, was make a statement that pretty much said, "Quit your bitching." And a lot of the members agreed with that individual. However, the main person still said, "Trigger," and "Oh my gosh, get him out of here." Again, slow down. The fact of the matter is, the entire populace, there's only 1 to 2% diagnosed as narcissists. 200,000 cases a year. It's very, very rare. And those statistics come from the Mayo Clinic. Additionally, there's websites such as Power of Positivity, which has 20 million members on Facebook. They have an article on there, 5 things narcissists do to be the center of attention. No author listed to this article. No clinical data reference to support it. Yet there it is, exposed to 20 million people who can take that in and all of a sudden think, "Hey, listen, that person that I know has this, so they must be a narcissist." Now, there's a few common misconceptions about narcissism that I came across in my research. One of them is that it's strictly limited to a grandiose sense of self. The second one being that they're not aware of what they're doing or feel empathy towards the individuals that they inflict harm on. And lastly, they don't want any kind of treatment or they're incurable. To that first point, I'd like to reference an article written by clinical psychologist Seth Meyers called "The Roots of Narcissism." Whereas Mr. Myers says it's not really an inflated sense of ego that's at the root of narcissism, but a strict defiance to vulnerability with anyone at any time. Now, since the narcissistic individual cannot trust anybody, they put up this big facade of being stronger and having a grandiose sense of self to compensate for that vulnerability. Nothing affects me. I'll get over this before anyone else. That doesn't faze me at all. Because if that vulnerability is seen, then somebody might exploit it and take advantage of them. Now, to the second point, there are many, many Facebook groups out there, both for victims and survivors of narcissistic relationships, as well as groups for narcissistic individuals themselves. There are individuals in both groups that are well aware of what they do and how it impacts people, and there are some that empathize and some that don't. Which brings us to a pretty dramatic point that narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder is a spectrum disorder, just like any other disorder. My autistic son is on the autistic spectrum. No two autistic individuals are the same, depending on where they fall on that line. And the same holds true to narcissists and people who have been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. The third point is probably the biggest misconception, and it's individuals with narcissism and diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder cannot be cured or don't want to be cured because they'll never admit that they're doing anything wrong. There's a great group on Facebook that I've received their permission to share with you on this video called Real World DBT, which stands for Dialectical Behavior Therapy. Now, that was a therapy that was common in the 80s with individuals diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, but has been broadened to help individuals with narcissism and diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. This group is full of very sympathetic and empathetic individuals who no longer want to hurt the people that they love and care about and want to learn techniques as far as controlling the way that they are. Now, you might ask yourself, wait a minute, the definitions of narcissist is these are people who are never going to change because they're never going to admit that they're ever wrong. Well, again, this is a spectrum disorder. There could be individuals far to one direction where, yeah, absolutely, they're never going to change. And then there'll be other individuals peppered throughout who certainly can change. The misconception that all narcissistic individuals cannot be cured is simply wrong. So when it comes down to it, after all the research that I did and the individuals I spoke to in multiple groups, now these are individuals who, they don't have any clinical background, but they're very knowledgeable about the subject. Not a single one of them felt that I fit the bill. That gave me some relief on one end, but it also made me concerned on another, which is the reason why I'm doing this video. When it came down to it, the individual calling me a narcissist in that relationship actually exhibited more of the traits than I did myself. And I know there's hope for that individual if that's how she is, just like I know there's hope for everybody out there. Now again, the purpose of this video is to not justify any narcissistic behavior or say that individuals diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder or victims of those relationships got what they deserved. It's nothing to do like that at all. It's to give a very specific and detailed example about name calling and how dangerous it can be, especially in this day and age where there's a lot of information out there, but the credibility of a lot of that information remains to be seen. And when we talk about name calling, obviously we know what that is. Again, I'm giving a very specific example here, but I myself was guilty of name calling as recently as a couple months ago. It's never right, and it can significantly hurt the person that you're with. The next video we're going to focus on is going to tie in the first three things that we've talked about here and put it in one nice little package for us. In the description below, I'm going to include a fantastic video by Dr. W. Keith Campbell, 5 minutes long, from a TED Talk series about what is narcissism, the different types of narcissism, and is there hope for individuals diagnosed with narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder. I'm also going to include the link to the article I referenced from Dr. Seth Meyers, and a link to one more article by general practitioner Pete Walker called The 4 F's, which assimilates aspects of PTSD and narcissism. So I hope this personal example helps put a little bit of foresight on name calling, and maybe we should do a little bit more homework before we use words that can cut and hurt people, especially buzzwords such as narcissism in today's society. Now, if you're liking these videos, I do ask that you please subscribe. You can do so by clicking the button here, and you can also check out last week's video here. Until next time, be the best you can be, and as always, forward focus finish.